Welcome back to the lab. This is an R34 GTT RB25DET NEO. It's back in the car, clearly. It actually runs. It's been there, done that, so I'm sorry you guys missed the first start. The customer was here for that. He popped down from his residence up the country a little bit, came down and cranked it over. Couldn't see oil pressure on the gauge. The gauge on the dash is lying. It's quite common for the sender units to be faulty on these things, and it was. It's intermittent. It did start working later on, so we had to tee in. It's around somewhere. Oh, it's on the bench. You don't need to see it. A mechanical gauge into one of the ports on our new oil cooler system that I'll show you shortly. Crank it over. Confirm that yes, it definitely has oil pressure. I knew that from testing on the engine stand before it went into the car and from flow through the system. But it's just prudent to confirm that it's there. You're a dork. I was going to use another word. You're a dork if you think that, you know, hey, let's just ignore the gauge. The gauge is saying 0, but oh, I reckon it's right, and just fire it up. That's not actually a good idea, just in case the gauge is not lying. Anyway, that's been done. Once we confirmed that there was oil pressure, I hooked up the crank angle sensor, which, by the way, is a great way to crank over the engine and not have it start or fire the injectors on these beasties, because there's no cranking signal. ECU says no and doesn't do anything. Plug that back in. First turn of the key, it just fired up and ran straight away, and it's pretty good. It needs a new coil pack harness that has got some corrosion on it that is causing a slight misfire at idle, and you can wriggle the harness and make it go away, so we're not going to muck about with that. That's just straight in the bin. There's a new one coming. It's paid for. It's coming from Trade Me. Haven't seen it yet, haven't had confirmation that it's coming, but I've paid for it. It should be here soon. We've booked for a tune for next week. I've not put the Link ECU into the car just yet. We're getting an expansion harness for that, and we're putting a fuel pressure and oil pressure sensor onto the car for some protection. So I shouldn't need to explain it. If you guys are watching the channel, you know all about that. The oil pressure is too low, you pull the RPM back and so forth. Same thing with the fuel pressure, and it's great for logging. So if it ever does Chernobyl in some way, shape or form, we can look at the logs and go, oh look, that's what happened there, and it should / might give us some relevant information. So the installation's not 100% totally uber mint right now. There's a couple of things going on. This hose here was, this is not a factory hose, this is some silicone hose that I've put in there. It had been perished and falling apart, so the previous people working on the vehicle, I just avoided insults there. They cobbled together something to work, and it didn't really. It was leaking, and it was never actually going to hold for what it does there. That hose sees full boost pressure in the manifold here, and they used something that was quite inappropriate and was going to cause problems. I figured you'd probably want to see it. So that they've just kind of done a Kiwi thing and just put together what they could with what they had, but it's not really appropriate. The clamps at the ends would be okay, although the hose is entirely the wrong shape for where it needs to go. You can't actually orientate that correctly, so the hose was kind of kinked over, and then when you put vacuum on it, it was crushing itself in. It's a pretty soft hose like that. As I say, it's exposed to full manifold pressure, and so they've put a brass coupling in between a couple of hoses, but look, I'm not trying hard. So that's just going to go down the road and just pop off like that. And then you'll have a big vacuum leak and the car won't run properly. So I don't believe the owner drove it hard enough on the way home for it to actually see any boost. But this would have been one of the first things that would have would have gone wrong on the way home. So that's silicone hose on there. It's a bit stiffer. It's less likely to cave in. We'll find out in a couple of seconds whether that will or not at idle, and it certainly should be okay at boost. Well, the boost levels we will be running anyway. Stock fuel system, basically. It's got some sort of aftermarket reg, which I'm not that fond of, but we'll just monitor fuel pressure and stuff, and if it's okay, it's okay. and there's some upgrades planned for this. I'm not going to tell you what they are. That's over to the customer to say whether I can or can't, and they haven't asked yet. So I suppose you want to hear it running, so I can do that for you. Just put some power on there. Battery was charged up a couple of days ago. Let's hope it's not too flat to make it go. It's got an alarm in it. Oh, look, the alarm's pretty unhappy. What are you doing? Didn't do that last time. Oh. Oh, there we go. Now we're sorted. Rightio. Told you it started first time. Pretty fast idle, isn't it? It runs great. As I say, a little bit of a misfire there. Yeah, idle's coming down. Viscous fan works well. It's pretty much what you would expect to hear from a motor with solid followers and forged pistons in there. Runs good. That is working. Yesterday, or day before actually, that was caving in and creating a big whistle because it was causing a restriction that shouldn't be there. Can't rev it to the moon because it's stone cold and it's a fresh build, and that's enough running that. If I can, there we go, without the appropriate loads on a fresh engine. We want to bed this one in properly, so minimal running. The next time that'll run is going to be with the Link ECU installed. I don't even know where they live in these cars, to be honest. It's probably down there in the passenger footwell. I'll have a look, figure it out. Looks like there's a harness heads over that way, so that'll do. We'll see. And we'll get all the sensors on it. We'll get it running as soon as we know that it's running, and it's running fine on the new ECU. It'll go on the trailer. It'll go and get its tune. All right. Oh, excuse that. That's basically ready to throw onto the dyno and sort out the new tune. So the ECU is installed. That goes into the factory box, which is down there at the bottom of your... Yeah, it's easier just to show you, isn't it? It's easier just to show you. Trying not to trip over my laptop cord and cause a disaster. It's there. It's right there. So the new ECU is in there. Link ECU G4X. It's a Link GTT, because this is a GTT. It's these on the size there. Software updated, firmware updated, tune updated, TPS calibrated, map sensor calibrated, air intake temp sensor calibrated, not calibrated, fitted. There. I just put it there because there's a cover that goes over the top here anyway. Fuel pressure checked, very high, but that's I guess someone wanted to get more fuel into the motor so that they could run more boost, because there is a boost controller on here. So someone in the past has had this running slightly more than stock power. Not that you can go that far anyway with stock injectors. You really can't ramp it up that much. So, and we won't be. So at this point in time, that's the package that's going to be done. In the future, I believe there's going to be the fancy intake manifold and the top mount turbo manifold. Probably leave that turbo on there. It'll be good for 400 horsepower or something, and some other things. But for now, that's basically it, apart from the cosmetic covers and stuff. I'll get it down the road to the dyno tuner, and we'll find out when it can actually be tuned. Starts and runs just like it did before. Makes no difference. Things you do when you put the Link ECU in there: the crank angle sensor, you wind that round to full advance so that you know that if someone fiddles with this, they can't actually advance the timing mechanically any more than what it is from what you set it to. All they can do, if someone tinkers with that, all they can do is retard the timing. They can't advance it unless they go into the ECU and change the tune there. So that's just a safety thing. If somebody takes this apart to do whatever and they put it back together and they don't check the timing, like the previous mechanics who had this apart, I've tried to get rid of them, but they put some marks on here so that they could put the still a little one there, see, so they could put the crank angle sensor back exactly where it had been before, which seems like a smart thing to do, but it's actually completely stupid, because if you've had the cylinder head off and you've put a new timing belt on there and everything, there's no way that crank angle sensor goes back exactly where it was before. That moves. You need to set the timing again. If you don't know how to do that, you should not be working on these, or any car for that matter. So that's just about the end of this project. I'm saying that very, very cautiously because something could go wrong, but at this point in time it looks pretty good. So it's going to need the filter taken out, cut open, make sure there's no metal in it. It's going to need the oil changed from running in oil to the proper oil after it's been run in and tuned and etc. on the dyno, and we've got to put some antifreeze in it. At this point in time it's only got water in it. That's a pretty common thing. A lot of people will do that for a couple of reasons. One, if you have any leaks, it's just water leaking and then you can clean up the mess easily. Two, with a metal style gasket, you don't want antifreeze getting in between the Viton seal that's on each side of the gasket and whatever surface it is, the head or the block. Words are not spitting out all that easily this morning. Didn't get much sleep last night. So basically, I'm going to chuck this on the trailer shortly and get it down the road to the dyno shop.